Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock, and thank you for joining the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities September informational webinar, Spreading the News, Resources Available for Disability Employment Awareness Month and Disability History Month. My name is Drew Andrews. I'm the director here at the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. This webinar is being recorded. Handouts can be downloaded from the chat section, which can be accessed by clicking on the chat icon or the speech bubble at the bottom of the Zoom window. You can also post your questions in that chat section. Closed captioning has been enabled and can be accessed on the bottom of your Zoom window as well. If you're having difficulty hearing the presentation, phone numbers that can be used to call and join the audio via phone while following the slides online will also be posted in the chat window. Our presenter today is Drexler B. James. He is the Marketing Communication Specialist for the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. He has a bachelor's degree in journalism and a dual master's degree in public administration and nonprofit management. So at this time, Drexler, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Drew. Good afternoon, everybody. I'm glad you are all here today. As Drew said, my name is Drexler B. James, and I am the Marketing and Communication Specialist here for the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. Our webinar today is called Spreading the News, Resources for Disability Employment Awareness Month and Disability History Month, both of which are taking place in the month of October. So today we have two learning outcomes. The first one is the importance of using people first language, and the second is how to engage in activities to increase awareness of Disability Employment Awareness Month and Disability History Month. Now, this webinar is going to be a little interactive. So every time you see this slide on your screen, this is going to let you know that it's time to engage in an open dialogue where we're going to ask some questions and we're going to talk to each other and we're going to create some conversation and share some ideas with each other. So at this time, I strongly encourage everybody to, if you would, utilize the hide self view from camera, which you can find if you click the small square next to the view at the top of your Zoom screen. We also strongly encourage everyone to please turn on your camera so we can see each other as we talk and engage in conversation. So we're going to start with an opening question. How would you define people first language? Feel free to unmute yourself and jump in, but I would like to know, how do you define people first language?
Hi,
Hello, everyone. This is Vivian from Project Tops in Miami, Florida. And for me, people first language is placing the student or the individual first than their disability or any other description that tries to define them, because it doesn't define them. It's just one component of who they are.
I love that answer. Anybody else want to share? No? Okay. Well, as Vivian said, people first language puts the individual up, it puts the individual first. So people first language is used to communicate appropriately and respectfully with and about individuals with disabilities. It emphasizes the person, not the disability, because we want to make sure that people understand that they are still people. No matter who they are, what their background is, they are still people. And this gives them the opportunity to still embrace who they are. Examples of people first language include saying a person who has, or a person with, or a person who, versus saying the disability before the person. Now, why is people first language important? Well, one, it's empowering. It proves that a person's ability or disability does not define who they are or what they can do. So it really makes someone feel that whatever they have does not define them. There are some people who may feel that because of their disability, they are unable to do certain things, or their lack of ability may stop them from doing certain things. And this empowers them to let them know that no matter what your disability is, you still can do whatever it is you put your mind to. So it's a very empowering tool. It's also acknowledgement. It's our way of acknowledging that they are a person, that they are not defined by whatever that definitive trait is. So they are not defined by their disability. Instead, the disability is just a part of who they are overall. But most importantly, it really helps to change the narrative. This helps to shift that conversation on inclusion for all people. So instead of isolating people because of their disability or isolating people because of their lack of ability, it really brings home the message that no matter who you are, no matter what you do, all of us are the same people. We all may approach things differently, but at the end of the day, we are all still people. So it really helps to change that narrative and causes a shift in our society on how we address and talk about those with disabilities. And you really think about how this can impact a person. If you think about those of us who wear glasses, for instance, it feels more empowering to say a person who wears glasses versus saying, say, oh, a person who is saying a blind person or a glasses wearing person. It really makes a difference because now people don't look at you based on your identity or your trait first, but they look at you as a person who just has something added to who they are. So it really is a very empowering language. And I know all of us in this field understand that, but I want this to just be a reminder and a refresher of how important it really is. So I have another question for everybody. What are some examples of people first language that you use, whether that's in general conversation, things you post on social media or in your marketing, conversations you may have with parents or students? I would like you all to share what are some examples of people first language you use?
Can I say?
Sure.
So I'm driving. So I'm driving, so I'm not putting the video, or you guys will be a little sick with the movement. But uh, we here in Lee County, we have a Future Makers Coalition that work with us, and they created the workforce with unique abilities. And the word unique abilities is really powerful. You know, when we use a lot, like with the FCS way, and even students and workers, that when they hear that unique abilities, they feel a little special. Just the way, they stop listening to the word disability all the time, and they see that as a strength. And one of the things we even talking today during lunch at our school, we're watching the Olympics and watching even people on the bow and arrow competition. Like and how amazing, like, that person can do just as good as a regular person doing the hitting the target, with the difference that they're using their feet or different ability, which is amazing. And when you put in that perspective, it's so much more powerful than, I love the way every time I hear the word unique ability, uh, I really believe that. And that's one of the things that we can empower those people, in general.
So you utilize saying students with unique abilities versus students with disabilities.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's definitely a powerful statement. We use that. It's in the name of our center, but we use that a lot to really make students feel that what they have really gives them a special ability, or it helps them to see that they think a little differently than everyone else, but it's in a positive way. Anyone else? What are some other examples of people first language?
I can go.
Go ahead.
My name is Abir, and I have like other perspective as a person with disability. So basically, in my dissertation, I touched on that subject, and that how people, it depends on the disability what they want to prefer first for the identity. So for me as a person, because I know that it's visible disability, so I go on, I say I'm a blind mother, I am a blind student, so I have to put my disability as an identity first, not because something else, is because I'm proud of how I got shaped because of this disability. But I heard other perspectives from other people as well. So the blind community, the majority, they prefer the first identity. When it comes to students, with autism, so I refer my child like a child with autism. So that my opinion, or that based on my research and how when I got interacted with individuals with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Abir. And I think Abir says something that's very, very important to keep in mind too, is you do have to ask an individual how they would prefer to be referred to. There are some individuals who would prefer people first language, where you would say, I am a person with. But as Abir said, there are some people who prefer their identity first, who would say, I am a blind person or autistic person. So you should have that conversation with an individual to know what they would prefer. But typically, to be on the safe side, it's better to start off with people first language, just so you don't come off as potentially offensive. Anybody else want to share anything? Some other examples of people first language that you utilize, or even examples you've heard?
Um, I'll go. I'll give an example. I'm Eddie Ryan, and I'm with McFatter Grow Your Future. We're at a technical college, so sometimes, well, not sometimes, we have students when they're ready for their program and they're going to integrate with the other peers that are not disabled. Rather than calling them non-disabled peers, I will refer to the peers that will be in their cohort or in their group as traditionally registering students, just so that's not saying that they are a student without a disability, because I don't know that, but I just call them traditionally registering students, where my students are going through Grow Your Future. So that's an example of how I don't use an ability or a disability to describe the person.
Thank you. I like that. I may start using that myself, actually, when referring to students without disabilities, because that's true. We don't know if those students have a visible disability or not. So that's really, really good as well. So I'm going to share a few just general tips to keep in mind when it comes to thinking about how to refer to a student with a disability or using people first language. The first one is emphasize the ability, not the limitations. So if you see an individual in a wheelchair, instead of saying, oh, they are wheelchair bound or confined to a wheelchair, say this is a person who uses a wheelchair. Saying that they use a wheelchair emphasizes their ability to use the wheelchair instead of highlighting the fact that they're in a wheelchair because they may not have full ability to use their limbs. Another tip, avoid language that suggests the lack of something. So saying a person with a disability instead of a disabled person is more powerful, because saying a person with a disability doesn't necessarily point out that they have a lack of something. It's the same as saying a person with diabetes versus a diabetic person. A person with diabetes is still a person, even if they have a condition. It doesn't mean that they're less than. Also, emphasize the need for accessibility and not the disability. So, an example that I never really thought much about until I really started learning more about this field was my father needed to use handicap parking. And growing up, that was very natural for me to just say, oh, he needs a handicap sticker, he needs handicap parking. But then I realized I was emphasizing his disability, create more accessibility ways for him to function. So I started saying, oh, he needs an accessible parking spot versus handicap. Because by saying handicap, it highlighted the fact that he wasn't able to move versus saying accessible, which means he needs parking that makes it easier for him to be able to get to where he needs to go. So there is a difference in that language, and it seems minute, but it does make a very powerful difference, especially when you're speaking to or about individuals with disabilities. Also, refrain from using any negative connotations. So again, growing up, it was very easy to say, oh, these are special needs students, these are simple students, instead of saying this is a student with an intellectual disability. By calling them special or simple, we're making them sound as if they are not important. We're really, and I'm being careful with the words I say here as well, but by saying special person, it really does give off this negative connotation that special means something is wrong with them, as opposed to saying they simply have a disability that allows them to function differently than your average student. So it's really, really important to make sure that we don't use any negative connotations when we are describing students with disabilities. Also, avoid any language that implies any negative stereotypes. So, as Ryan was saying, instead of saying, oh, students without disabilities, she would say traditionally enrolling students. Because by saying that, it's implying that these students are the same as you. They are enrolling in the same type of classes, they are going through the same process as you are. If you say, oh, these are normal students, or you say these are healthy students, it makes it sound as if the student with the disability, that again, there's something wrong with them, and they will carry that stigma with them. And it's not just with them, but in general, to say that in public, it really puts on a stigma that if you have a disability, that there's something wrong with you. And that is not the case. And importantly, avoid portraying people with disabilities as inspirational due to their disabilities. Working as a journalist, I would hear these types of stories all the time where they would highlight the fact that someone did something great in spite of their disability. And it sounds inspirational, but it makes it sound as if anyone with that disability should not be able to do anything. And that's not the case. You may have heard stories yourself where you hear this person overcame their disability to achieve XYZ. But by framing it that way, it makes it sound as if you have this disability, for you to achieve XYZ is exceptional versus really helping people to see that this could be the norm, and it is the norm. This disability will not stop you from achieving XYZ if you put your mind to it. Does anyone have any questions or comments so far?
Drexler, may I make a general comment?
Yes, ma'am.
I think you're doing an awesome job, and I think it's very much needed for all of us to hear this as a good reminder and how we apply it. I wanted to just make one suggestion and get everyone's feedback. Sometimes we need to stop and define what a disability is. From the student's perspective, what we may be considering a disability or using the term intellectual disability, but the student may not use the same terminology. And it comes back to how they were instructed in an academic setting, or maybe what their family is comfortable with. And many of our students may feel that they don't have a disability because their parents have encouraged them to such levels, and other students really hold on to a label or an exceptionality as what they have. So just opening the door for the conversation of what is a disability? What is a disability in your eyes? What are your strengths? What are your challenges? Just going down that road to understand before we use people first language, which is something that we practice here in Project Tops, but understanding the student's point of view and then educating the student and the family as well.
That's a really, really good point, Vivian. May I ask, how would you recommend or suggest approaching that conversation?
Well, it usually starts for me with the concept of when we talk about the scholarship and we talk about everything that we try to do, or when I interview students or take pictures, that we say, you know, the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. What is your unique ability? What do you consider your abilities? What do you consider your disabilities? I always try to start with abilities first and then disabilities, because that's the term that they're used to. When I used to always say at the beginning, your unique ability, sometimes unique had a negative connotation, just like special, just like you mentioned. So it really goes back to the individual students' experience and what they've encountered. You know, sometimes special has a negative connotation, sometimes unique. I don't want to be unique. I want to be like everybody else. And then we always say the same thing. Then that's kind of boring. We all look the same. If we all act the same, if we're all, you know, it's okay to stand out sometimes. And then they look at you and they may not understand it the first couple of times, but when they see that we're consistent, when our faculty is consistent, when we mean what we say and do, then they start understanding it. And I think that makes them feel more comfortable. And then it's making sure that the families know it just as well.
I love that. So it's really highlighting the positive attributes within the student before you even start looking at what some people may consider negative.
Correct.
That's
Some
a
students are
great.
really proud and they'll tell you in a large forum when it might not exactly be appropriate. Well, I have this and my diagnosis is, and you're like, okay, hold on. I don't necessarily want you to put all your business out there. This is not the time or the place. And then there are other students that say, oh, there's nothing wrong. And it can go to the extremes. So it's up to us as to how we handle it and how we channel that information. And it's going to imply, I'm going to make your segue, it's going to go right into the workforce and what they do when they don't have all our levels of support to help them. We need to prepare them for that, because what they say with us, I think of us as the last stop, you know, before they go into employment. So we need to get them ready for that and give them the language.
That's great advice. That's some great tips. And actually, Vivian, you sort of segue right into our next discussion question, which is, are there any other general tips or suggestions that you would offer? I think what Vivian said is a great one, is asking the student how they define disability for themselves and how they see themselves. Because I think knowing how they see themselves will help you know how to help them share with others how they see themselves. Because self-esteem is a big part of this as well. And that's a big part of People First Language, is helping to build a positive self-image within the students that they can now take out into the community with them. So does anyone else have any tips that they would suggest or recommend?
I can go.
Go ahead.
That's Abir again. Again, you know, as I'm referring, I kind of sensitive about this subject because I lost my vision 5 years ago, and interacting with, you know, the population and how people identify me. So it's sometimes hurting when they look at me like, oh, I achieved that when I'm blind. So how did you cross the street? How did you do that? So instead of questioning like how did you do it, and you know when you're back in your mind that that person has a disability, ask me, what kind of techniques do you use? What strength do you have? And how did you achieve that? So it's better to, you know, emphasize the strength rather than, you know, questioning the ability, like if that person can do it or not. And like I have like a little example about when my child, again, as my child, you know, that child with autism. So I took him to the orthodontics, and the nurse just immediately, because I'm blind, she doesn't want to even teach me how to put the rubber band between the upper teeth and the lower teeth. So I said, I will do it. Just give it to me, because I have to step up for my child too. I took the rubber band, I felt with my finger, I felt the teeth and the braces, and I put it and just said, wow, how did you do it? So it just, I was in that point, I just wanted to prove to her that I can do it. I can feel, I can touch, I can understand. It's not because I'm blind, I don't understand what's going on. So yeah, that was a little example.
Thank you for that example. I mean, that's powerful to share. And as you said, it's highlighting your abilities. Just because you have a disability, whether it's visible or invisible, does not mean you cannot do things, but it's really highlighting your abilities and your strengths even still. Anyone else have any tips that they think would be really important for everyone to share? Remember, this is an open discussion. All of us are in the same industry together. So what you share can really help somebody else.
Hi, Drexler. Thank you for this. It's wonderful. And Vivian, thank you too for everybody who's commented so far. I just wanted to add to Vivian's comment. It's really important for all humans with disability, without a disability, that we have self-awareness. Because when we have self-awareness of tools that we need or help that we may need, then we can access those tools. We can advocate for ourselves to get what we need. So it really is important to have those conversations. Vivian, we do them as well in the beginning, you know, talking about disability, talking about strengths first, absolutely, and talking about disability and what it means, and also all the tools that are available for people who may need help with something. So bringing up those conversations in the beginning really, I think, inspires our students to start developing that self-awareness, because ultimately all of our goals is maximal independence. That might be living alone. That hopefully is going to be employability, sustainable employability. And if that's the ultimate goal, then people have to understand their own strengths and their own challenges.
Ms. Kier, if you don't mind me asking, what are some other tools that you have utilized to really help people with educating how to use people first language, or even yourself?
That's a great question. I always veer towards the asking the person first and foremost. And then if I'm talking to somebody and we happen to be talking about disability, it will be the first person language. So today I was having a conversation with a student and I was talking about adults with autism. So instead of the autistic adults, right, we're learning about what tools people use, it's other adults with autism. But whenever it comes to person, it's the same thing with disability. It's the same thing with pronouns. It's the same thing with gender identity, is what does that person want? Because they may identify as something, but this is how they would like to be referred to or spoken about, or not at all.
Thank you. Anybody else have any tips or any suggestions or anything else they want to add to this conversation?
I've got one more thing. It's Eddie Ryan again. One of the things that I do come across often, working with students of all various abilities and ages, is oftentimes when they get to me, when they're at the end of, you know, their schooling or whatever it is, they are not even aware they have a disability. They know that they went to like a small class for extra help, and there was that lady that would come in and check on them, and they can't identify their disability. So we definitely talk about what the disability is, and we look at it, and then we look at characteristics that could be common amongst people with that disability. So it's kind of funny when I have students that present with autism that they're all shocked, that they're like, you mean my autism is the reason I have problems with social skills? I'm like, yes, this is why you don't enjoy making eye contact. And this is why you don't like to have those exchanges, you know, one-on-one. So this is something that is part of the disability, but we can work around it. So then I'll try to give them strategies, and then we talk about accommodation. So even helping that student define what the disability is, because they're not even aware that there's a disability at times. They've just been given services and not told what it was for, and that's that. So in order to advocate as a, you know, an adult, they need to know exactly what it is that they are dealing with.
And Ms. Ryan, you said a word that's extremely powerful, and that's advocate. Being able to identify for themselves and speak up for themselves and be able to say, these are the accommodations that I need for myself in order to achieve these goals. So I think advocacy is definitely a great one.
Drexler.
Yes, sir.
Also, just on the as a final comment about that slide with all of the wonderful things that have been shared, what we're sharing about, these are most of the folks that have spoken are people that are working at Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Programs, and they're helping students learn to use appropriate language when they're describing their own disability, as well as using people first language themselves whenever they're talking with the student. And all of that is a part of this because language is so important in the way that we look at ourselves, the way that we perceive ourselves, and the way that others perceive us. And so this has been that's really great input and suggestions.
I agree. And thank you everyone who has shared their suggestions. I'm sure this is helpful to everybody. It's helpful for me as well, keeping in mind of things that I create as I share about the great things your programs are doing, the things the center is doing as well. So, as I said, Disability Employment Awareness Month is in October, and it's a time to really talk about the importance of including those with disabilities into the workforce and creating an inclusive work environment. So, National Disability Employment Awareness Month takes place every month, and it's a great thing for all of our programs to highlight because one of our main goals is to prepare our students to be employed. So I do just want to share a couple of quick facts about Disability Employment Awareness Month. And all these facts were pulled from the Able Trust 2002 U.S. Census Update Report. There is a link in this presentation when you download it that you can look at the report yourself, as well as check out the Able Trust Disability Employment Awareness Month page. So in 2022, 2,875,501 Floridians, which was 13.5% of the population, had a disability. 1,265,090 Floridians with disabilities are between the ages of 18 and 64, which is the prime working age group. And the median income for Floridians with a disability is $28,711 compared to $37,783 for those without a disability. So we do see that those with disabilities are a big part of the Florida population. So they should also be a major part of the Florida workforce as well. They should have the opportunities, just as everyone else does, to go out there and earn their own income and be able to be independent and to stand on their own. October is also Disability History Month. There's a quote that I grew up hearing all the time that says that a person who doesn't know their past won't have a future. And what that quote means is someone who doesn't understand where they've come from won't know where they are going. So Disability History Month is an opportunity for all of us to take a step back and see how far we have come in advocating for equal rights for those with disabilities, so we can also know how much more work needs to be done and what direction that we are going. There are still some gaps that need to be filled in, but we won't know what those gaps are if we aren't aware of the gaps that have already been filled. So I do just want to give you, again, a few brief history facts for Disability History Month. In 1990, the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law on July 26th. So just a couple months ago, it did celebrate 24 years. In 2002, the federal No Child Left Behind Act was signed into law. In 2016, Florida passed the Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Act, which established the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. This last fact down here at the bottom, you'll notice there's some blanks in it because this is your part of the history. If you fill in the blanks with the year your program was started, you can say that you are a part of disability history for your institution. And it's important for you to recognize the fact that you are also a part of history. What you do is no small feat. You are changing lives, you are advocating, you are educating, you are empowering, and that's a big part of what history does. History changes the trajectory of people's lives, and your program is doing that for those individuals with disabilities previously did not think that it was possible for them to go to college. So keep that in mind when you're going in and out and talking to people. You're part of history. But history isn't just what has been done, but it's also what is happening now. There are changes happening every day in our society that's a part of history that shows how what we are doing and how the conversation about individuals with disabilities is changing. If you think about maybe even 10 years ago, certain things that may have been said that are no longer seen as appropriate, things that were done that was no longer seen as appropriate. For me personally, I remember when I was in high school, students who had disabilities were put in a separate classroom. They were not allowed to integrate into the classroom with us. But now we see and we are advocating for students to be part of an inclusive part of the college campus. I also remember it was said as a joke, but it was said that, oh, if you were acting slow, you rode the little short bus because there was that yellow bus that would take those with disabilities to school separate from the regular school buses. We don't see as many of those buses anymore because we want to send that message that they shouldn't be isolated on a separate mode of transportation. They can ride the bus just like everybody else. Even what you see in media, I don't know if anyone listens to rap music, but about a week or so ago, a rapper wanted to use the R word in her song. And she got a lot of negative pushback against that because people are saying that's not appropriate language anymore. We do not use that word. And there was so much pushback. She rewrote the entire song and took that word out of it and replaced it with something else. A few years ago, that would have gone by without a notice. People would have thought it was okay. People would have thought it was funny. But now there's so many more people who will say that is not appropriate. We want to change that. We don't want that associated anymore because that is a misrepresentation of a certain population. So can anyone else think of anything that really shows how we're changing the conversation of those individuals with disabilities in society?
Drexler, it's the start of the semester, and I know that just a little over a week ago, we received a picture of students from a technical college that is a technical college with a brand new program. And whenever they sent us that picture, the person sending it said, and it really hit home because she said these students would not have had this opportunity if it weren't for the Florida Center for Students with Unique Abilities. Now, that's not exactly correct. We're simply able to be a part of this work. Hopefully, it could have happened some other way. And I'm saying that because every time that we have a new program established and new students enroll, we're offering something to students that they would not have had access to without the programs that we're working hard to develop and to implement. So I just want everybody to remember that. You've mentioned that already about changing the trajectory of lives, but you are changing history for each of those individuals in your program.
That is true. That is very true. Anyone else can think of any examples, maybe something you saw growing up or language you heard growing up that at the time seemed appropriate, but now it's changed. Now people are saying we don't want to refer to people that way. We don't use that word anymore.
I have
Right.
one for you.
Okay.
It's not as common as it once was, but I still hear it on occasion. People will oftentimes use the word spastic to put somebody down. And usually that's really referring to, it's very offensive to people with epilepsy who have seizures because they have spasms. So often people will be joking around, you're spastic, you're spastic. And it's being used less, which is good.
That's a good example. I think I actually remember maybe a year ago, a song came out that had the word spaz in it. And radio stations would not play the song because they didn't want to offend anybody. So that's definitely a really good example.
I have another one. It's Eddie.
Okay, go ahead.
Um, one of the things that now I totally drew a blank. I'll jump back on. I was like, two thoughts crossed my mind and now I forgot it, left my head. Oh, I got it. All right. I know a lot of times people would joke about the weather and it, fluctuating and refer to it as bipolar or some other like mental health issue. And they've actually started discussing the fact that you shouldn't refer to weather being bipolar or use another mental health condition to describe the weather because it could be offensive to people that do have mental health conditions. So that's something that I've heard as of recently few years.
Wow, that's actually a good one because I do say bipolar Florida weather quite a bit. So that now makes me question myself and have to say, I got to come up with another phrase so I don't offend someone who may have a mental health disorder. So thank you for that. That was educating for me.
Hey Drexler, it's Todd Byers. Can I jump in real fast?
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Hi everyone. So good to see all of you and to hear all these great conversations. And Drexler, you're doing an amazing job. Always very hard to talk about these kind of things, but very needed. Which made me think, so I'm in Pasco County and I'm starting a new program. And one thing I don't know if this is exactly on point, but one thing I've really noticed is everyone is scared to talk to me or use the wrong terms because they don't want to, this is such a new program here in Pasco, or brand new. And everyone has been really nervous to say, they always say, well, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. And it's been really, because we live in this culture or our profession, it's kind of second nature to us to use people first language. So it's really eye-opening to me how far we really have to go, and we've made a lot of progress. I also realize that a lot of people want to do the right thing. They just don't know what to say. So that comes back to me, and our mission is to just continue to just use this word and focus on abilities. And so I guess my point is it was pretty eye-opening to me how far, how no one even knew what to say about my new program. And also at the same time is when I bring up my program, they all know one person. It always goes like, oh, I have this one person. All I have is, and just the idea that we are all different. And just because you know one person, like Drew always says, just because you know one FPTCP, one FPTCP, it's the same with all these, we all have different abilities, and I think it's really interesting I'm really excited to bring this program here because it's gonna really help our community, not only the students, but the staff and the culture here and the community here in Pasco County. So thanks.
Welcome. And actually, what I would love right now is for those who are online that are part of a established Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program, what advice would you give to Todd on how he can best educate his surrounding community on the best language to use? Anyone have any tips or advice they may be willing to offer Todd?
Yes, please. Thanks, Drexler.
It's Eddie again, Eddie Ryan. I'm at McFadder and we've been around since 2017. So I guess we're pretty well established. And it's gonna take some time. I notice if I just show up in those folks' spaces, like in their classrooms, and I'm just part of the classroom environment and I'm just there, sometimes I can model the interactions I have with the students and they're like, oh, okay, so it's okay for me to interact just like I would with any other student. And at times I'm even able to catch something that I wouldn't be privy to. So I'll overhear a conversation between a student in the program and a traditionally registering student. And then sometimes I can educate, both students or one student about, like we did have a situation where my student is autistic and he does have problems with language and he's very literal. And he asked for a young woman's phone number, but persistently, and he kept saying persistently, where I said, now you've passed the point of persistence where it's harassment because the person's told you no. So I had to give her some background information or strategies or tips to how would you handle that situation if you were to come across that in the community or in the workplace, because you probably will work with a neurodiverse person at some point. And so I just try to make myself available and present and in services if I'm allowed to give it, little mini ones, because most of them we're able to get points. So the staff is appreciative of that too.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anyone else from an established program have any words of wisdom to offer Todd on the best way to educate the community around him on how to interact with their students? Miss Geraldine, I see you on my screen. I feel like you may have something to share.
But I'm trying to see how to word it because, like you said, there's not a traditional way. Each student I have to handle differently. And I always like to have the parents online or either on the phone with me because some parents are the ones who set up the language for the students. And it really surprises me when you've had an IEP for all these years. And because it's supposed to be student-centered, a lot of these students don't even understand. They'll say to me, no, I don't have an IEP. No, I don't have a disability. So I feel very strongly about that. And my approach is always given with grace, with a lot of, I really think we need to understand why you have an IEP. You should be part of your IEP meetings. This is not the first time you have seen or read an IEP. And if it is, then we will go over it together. And I go, Mom, are you on board with this? And then I'll hear them say, well, I don't want him to think he has a disability. So now I have to do parent training. So but again, each student is different. There's not a cookie cutter way. So I keep hearing these different things. I'm like, oh, that's good. Oh, yeah, that's good. Oh, yeah, that's good. But having these conversations is like having an IEP meeting because it's curtailed individually with each student. And again, even though this is college, I do invite my parents because initially I want them to know this is what we all have to be on board and on the same page. And then I let the parents go. So I don't feel like I really answered your question because it really is based individually.
Well, great point, and thank you, and good to see you.
You too, Tom.
I think you actually gave a really interesting point. Is it is based on the student. So you do have to build with the student as well as with the community to know how best to navigate those conversations. So that's still a good point, Geraldine. We appreciate that insight. All right, so I'm sharing a few ideas for different things you can think about doing to celebrate. I don't want to say celebrate, but to acknowledge and recognize both Disability History Month and Disability Employment Awareness Month. So one idea is you can create a display at your institution. Share information at your institution about your program, or share some interesting facts, maybe some history facts, maybe some statistics about disability employment, but create a display that would draw people's attention and get people interested in the conversation. Also, feel free to share on social media as well. If you are talking about Disability Employment Awareness Month, there are 2 hashtags that will allow you to join the conversation online. Hashtag NDEAM and hashtag DEAM. Use those when you're talking about disability employment because that's the hashtag that Able Trust will be using as well as other organizations. But talk about it on social media. Talk about where your students are currently working. You can even use it as an opportunity to talk about those organizations that you would like to see your students work at. See if they have a social media handle and tag them to say, we have students who would love to work for you. Get a conversation going with them on social media. You can host a webinar of your own or a panel discussion, especially if you have students who are currently working or you have business partners that you regularly work with who can share some words of wisdom or maybe share some tips on how to prepare students to enter the workforce. But this would be a great opportunity to get your partners and your community partners involved as well. And highlight your students and business partners. Acknowledge the work that they are doing. Acknowledge where they are and how far they've acknowledge your partners and give them an opportunity to let them know that you appreciate everything that they have done to help create a more inclusive work environment for your students.
Drexler, can I jump in really quick? This is Justin Adams from the Able Trust.
Please do.
Excellent. How's everybody doing? We have actually something that we are doing for DEAM this year, and we've kind of gotten an early start on it. It is a Tell Your Story contest where we're asking students with disabilities, parents and or guardians of children with disabilities, and adult vocational rehabilitation clients to just answer one or two quick questions, fill out a quick form, to share about their experiences in the education and employment spheres. So if you're all right with it, I would love to share the link to the contest landing page. And anybody who has contact with those audiences, again, students, parents or guardians, and adult VR clients, if you would share, if I could impose on you to share that with those contacts, we would greatly appreciate it. So I'm going to go ahead and share that link if that's all right.
Yes, that is perfectly fine. I do encourage you, everyone, please participate. We have been sharing about the Tell Your Story contest on our social media channels, and we did put it in our news brief, but please continue to encourage your students and your parents to participate in this.
Thank you so much, Drexler, and thank you all.
Thank you, Justin. What are some other ideas or activities that you all can think of? Again, this is an open panel discussion, so feel free to, there's an old phrase, they say, throw spaghetti on the wall to see if the noodles stick, which means if you think it's a good idea, it's going to stick. So let's just start throwing some spaghetti noodles on the wall. What are some other ideas that you think would be great to recognize and acknowledge these 2 observation months?
It's Eddie again. I just have so many ideas.
Please share a couple of them.
All right. So my background is in blindness. Ironically, the first speaker who was saying that she's 5 years into blindness, but my background is in blindness and low vision. And October 15th is White Cane Awareness Day during October. So what we've done in the past, which you could do with your students minus the white cane, is we've taken trips out in the community on public transit, just so people could be aware that there's a white cane, and then they kind of know that there's people in the community that are individuals with visual impairments, and that's how they travel. So we would take a large group of students, and they would get to travel train, and then we would have a destination and just kind of have like a little celebration and then travel back to like one meeting point. So just having awareness in the community that there are people in my community that do have disabilities and they're here. I feel like that's also very good exposure. So you could do that same concept with students that have other disabilities, and just gather and do some sort of travel training, just so people are aware that these are individuals in the community.
That's a good idea. And you said that White Cane Day is October 15th?
Yes, it is.
Okay, I went ahead and put that on my calendar as well, so I can make sure to acknowledge that also. But I definitely think that's a great idea.
I have another idea.
Yes, go ahead.
So I've been volunteering in my child's school since I lost my vision, and increase awareness to children because they don't know. So I always a believer, when we start with the young population, they're gonna grow naturally understanding what kind of different disabilities around them. So every time when the visual impairment to blindness awareness month, I go to the school and volunteer in my child's grade or list or whatever grade they can assign me, and I show them braille, how they can assist somebody if they see somebody like cannot see, what's the right way to hold their hands, and understanding the cane and how it makes sounds. So that's an idea as well.
I think that's a great idea. Really giving them that exposure at a young age, so they know how, as they grow up, to interact with individuals with disabilities.
Yes, and I was providing them like with interactive questions, like let's display what kind of disabilities So it was interesting, like kids trying to figure out, and most of the kids who came up with the names of different disabilities, they have a person in their family with disability.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to throw any ideas out there to see what sticks to the wall? Okay, well, if not, uh, we are coming to the end of our webinar, but I do want to share here are a few resources where you can get some ideas, additional ideas, and information for both observation months. Again, this will be in the PowerPoint, which you'll be able to download. And are there any final thoughts, questions, ideas, emotional outbursts, anything else anyone wants to say or share?
Drexler, I'd like to remind everybody that Claudia has put a link to the webinar evaluation in the chat section. And so if folks would like to complete an evaluation now, that would be great and give us ideas for future webinars. We also will be sending out a link to this recording as well as the handouts, but the handouts are also in the chat. Also, if you want to download that PDF that has all of that great list of resources on it. And I want to thank everyone for their participation, but especially I want to thank Drexler for a job well done of putting together such a great webinar for today to talk about disability employment awareness month and disability history. I've just thought of that always as being very important. I think that change and opportunities really begin with awareness. And so it's our responsibilities as program, as folks in our field, supporting students with intellectual disabilities who are earning credentials to gain, to enter careers and really have meaningful employment, that we highlight what's going on. There are so many wonderful things that are going on. There are so many wonderful resources that are available. And so check out those resources because the more that we emphasize and focus on a topic, the more that I think we begin to see that. And so talking about employment and improving employment outcomes for individuals with disabilities. And then one other thing I just wanted to let folks know, this year we'll be having two different types of webinars. On the first Tuesday of every month, we will have our regular FCSUA informational webinar, just like today. And then from time to time, the third Tuesday of every month, we'll be having a Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program Technical Assistance webinar, where it will be for folks who are involved in Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition programs. And we'll discuss topics that will be specifically focused on programs and information for staff and coordinators. So I just wanted to share that information. So as you're receiving notices about webinars, we're not doing 2 informational webinars a month. We're doing only one on the first Tuesday. And then the third Tuesday, you'll get information about an FPCTP webinar.
All right.
Any comments or questions? Again, back to Drexler.
If there are none, I just do want to remind everyone to follow us on our social media platforms. We are on Facebook, Instagram, X, which is formerly known as Twitter, and YouTube. This webinar will be uploaded to YouTube soon, so you will get a notification about that as well, as Drew has said. And if you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, you can reach out to me at any time. This is my contact information. And please also remember to fill out that evaluation form for this webinar, as well as give us feedback for any upcoming topics that you would like for us to discuss as well. I do want to say thank you everyone for attending today. We do appreciate it. And we hope you all have a good afternoon. And we will see you at the next webinar.
And be sure and send us, if you have some pictures of things that you do for Disability Employment Awareness Month, or any time that you would like to share with us information about your Florida Post-Secondary Comprehensive Transition Program, please share that with us, and then we're happy to share it on our social media channels. Bye, everyone.